This episode is brought to you by Honeylove. Stop wearing uncomfortable underwear and start wearing stuff that makes you look good and feel good. For a limited time only, you can get Honeylove on sale. Get 20% off your entire order with our exclusive link, honeylove.com/weirdest. Support our show and check them out at honeylove.com/weirdest. You know that feeling when you get home from a long day and immediately want to take off your bra? Yeah. Me too. With Honeylove, you'll never experience that again. Treat yourself to the best bras and shapewear on the market and save 20% off at honeylove.com/weirdest. Use our exclusive link to get 20% off. honeylove.com/weirdest. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Start the new year with confidence thanks to Honeylove. This episode is brought to you by Babbel. Be a better you in 2024 with Babbel, the science-backed language learning app that actually works. Babbel's tips and tools are approachable, accessible, and delivered with conversation-based teaching. It's helping me learn to order food and ask for directions in German without checking translation apps or dictionaries. Here's a special, limited-time deal for our listeners. Right now, get 55% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/weirdest. Get 55% off at babbel.com/weirdest, spelled BABBEL.com/weirdest. Rules and restrictions may apply. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Around New Year's, we tend to get obsessed with how to change ourselves. Therapy can help you make changes that really stick. I've relied on therapy to help me be the best version of myself for years. Working with the right therapist can set you up for success in all aspects of life. If you're thinking of trying therapy and don't know where to start, consider giving BetterHelp a try. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. This year, celebrate the progress you've already made. Visit betterhelp.com/weirdest today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/weirdest. At Popular Science, we report and write dozens of science and tech stories every week. And while most of the stuff we stumble across makes it into our articles, we also find plenty of weird facts that we just keep around the office. So we figured, why not share those with you? Welcome to The Weirdest Thing I Learned This Week from the editors of Popular Science. I'm Rachel Feltman.
I'm Jess Boddy.
And I'm Amanda Reed.
Happy New Year! Welcome to the show!
Woo! Yeah!
New Year, save me!
New Year, new season!
Yes. Season 8, if anyone's keeping track. I know we kind of stopped, doing it that way, but on our spreadsheet it says Season 8. So
we added a new tab. It's happening.
Yeah. So listeners, thanks for bearing with us during our short holiday break. One quick exciting piece of housekeeping before we get into the show. Jess and I are planning to try to do a bunch of cool Weirdest Thing and Non-Weirdest Thing content this year. And we're planning on doing a Q&A episode, session, stream, whatever, on Twitch sometime in the next few weeks. So definitely follow Jess on Twitch if you don't already. Follow me on Patreon. Those are both places where you can reliably get updates about the kind of stuff we're doing that doesn't necessarily go in this feed. You can find all of that info in the show notes, and we're really excited to, do some weird stuff on video, other formats. Who knows? What other formats exist? Clay tablet.
On TikTok, the teens are getting really into wax tablets.
Oh my God, of course they are. Of course they are. Cuneiform content.
They're literally like, here's how I erase my wax tablet at the end of the day. Here's how I use it.
I'm going to start using a piece of slate like Little House on the Prairie. That's my new influencer move. Wonderful. I love it. So on The Weirdest Thing I Learned This Week, we start by each offering up a little tease about some kind of fact or story we found in the course of reading, writing, reporting, sending out carrier pigeons, etc. and decide which one we just absolutely have to hear more about first. Then once we've all had time to spin our little science yarns, we reconvene and decide what the weirdest thing we learned this week actually was in a fun, non-competitive, supportive way. Jess, what's your tease?
My tease is that I'm going to talk about a kind of famous medieval torture device that's actually kind of not real.
I love that. I wonder if there will be a video game involved.
How dare you?
No, I'm so sorry.
You're actually, no, you're right.
Oh, no.
How dare you?
Amanda, what's your tease?
All right. My tease is parking says a lot about who we are as a society.
Oh my God. I always like to brag about my parallel parking skills, and I wonder if this will be relevant.
Potentially, yeah.
Huge.
Wow. Can't wait. I want to talk about an animal that takes 10,000 naps a day. And it's not me, actually.
10,000?
Surprisingly. Yeah, 10,000
Holy moly.
naps per day.
Is it a nap or are they just resting their eyes?
Oh my gosh. That's the scientific question, Amanda.
Wow.
I guess I can get right into it since
Please.
you've really queued me up. Okay, so as we've discussed on previous episodes of The Weirdest Thing I Learned This Week, a podcast from the editors of Popular Science, sleep is like both very mysterious and very important. All animals do it, even ones without brains, like those jellyfish I talked about that can learn from their mistakes, which is wild, or central nervous systems even. Again, so jellyfish, they sleep. Wild. And a lot of single-celled organisms, they don't like sleep per se, but they have circadian rhythms, which means they have biological functions that follow a roughly 24-hour cycle. So, like, how'd that happen? That's amazing. Incredible. But again, it's all very mysterious. We know that sleep is essential, but like defining what the thing that is essential, that is sleep, that is universally necessary for animals, we still don't really have a handle on that. We don't know exactly what sleep does. We know some stuff that sleep does, but we don't know what all it does or what it did first. So we don't know when or how it evolved. And most of the really robust research we have on it is on primates and rodents. So scientists are always curious about how other animals sleep. And that's where this recent study on chinstrap penguins comes in.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Beloved
Cute little guys.
creatures.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love a cute little guy.
Researchers found that these flightless birds get about 11 hours of sleep a day, which like doesn't sound all that remarkable at face value. It's like not that much more than the average human is supposed to get. But the real kicker is how they get it, because they get this 11 hours of sleep in increments of roughly 4 seconds a time.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
What?
The ultimate micro sleepers. So scientists hung out with a colony of thousands of breeding chinstrap penguins, and they kept close tabs on 14 of them in particular. And it was important that they really be actually closely monitoring some of these penguins with sensors, because from the outside, and as previous observational studies had shown, it seemed like the penguins were like doing this sort of like slow blinking and head jerking you would expect from sleep-deprived parents. Not surprising. We already know that these animals spend weeks like hardly sleeping to protect their nests from both predators and from other penguins looking to like steal pebbles or eggs. It's a very busy, chaotic place to be taking care of babies. And yeah, the general consensus for a long time has been that chinstrap penguins in their mated pairs, they trade off on either hunting or guarding the nest. And when they're guarding the nest, they like literally do not sleep. So researchers attached electrodes to these 14 birds that they were watching closely to track what was going on. And they found that all those little blinks and like head jerks were brief periods of sleep.
Wow.
And they were doing this about 10,000 times a day, which added up to an apparently sufficient 11 hours of sleep.
Oh my God.
Okay. That's like a really good amount of sleep.
Yeah.
Do not tell the biohacking people this.
Oh my
Yes,
God,
this is-
dude.
Keep this away from the biohackers.
Yeah, I will get into that in a minute.
Oh,
But
no.
like disclaimer up top, like this is not relevant to human life. Do not
Take
microsleep
note, biohackers.
in this fashion.
Yeah.
So basically these birds, when they go out to sea to do their like stint grocery shopping while the other parent is babysitting, they do experience some slow wave sleep. Slow wave sleep is like what restful sleep is for birds. That is the state that they enter where you're like, that's not a sleepy bird, that's a sleeping bird. But they spent like way more time awake and active even then. They were awake like 2/3 of the time they were out hunting, and they would come back to land and they would spend the first few hours catching up on sleep on the shorelines, like actually sleeping. And then they would get back to the nest and they would go into this micro sleep strategy. And then they could spend like half a day, more than half a day, just having these little 4-second dozes. They found that all told, 75% of sleep among the chinstrap penguins was in episodes lasting less than 10 seconds.
Wow.
Yeah. And
so
this
most of their sleep is those little blips.
Exactly.
Wow.
And these observations were only at nests. So it's possible and in fact likely that when they are not actively raising eggs, they sleep more, quote unquote, normally by our standards. And there are other animals that, like, in certain situations can use little bursts of microsleep to catch up on sleep. Even humans do this to some extent, which I'll talk more about in a minute. But this is the most extreme, like, brief microsleep and the biggest accumulation of it that scientists have ever observed. And it's also the first time that they've seen something anywhere close to this extreme where the animal is not suffering. Like, the animal is behaving normally. This seems to be the way it is designed to go for this animal for like a really long period of time, several weeks. So that's like pretty wild. And they think this probably, is an adaptation that was driven by the very specific environmental factors of King George Island in Antarctica, or off of Antarctica, where they were observing these penguins. Penguins flock together. They have to incubate their eggs in a big group to protect them from predators. So, like, they need sleep, but it's like they're in a noisy group. They have to be vigilant. And so even when they feel safe because they're surrounded, they're still like surrounded by a bunch of noisy penguins. So yeah, it's possible that like it's possible that penguins, that, developed the ability to really benefit from these really brief bursts of sleep constantly, were the ones that were most successful in raising their eggs and continuing on to have more babies. One other interesting thing they found is that the penguins at the like outer edge of the cluster of penguins incubating their eggs seem to fall asleep for longer stretches than the ones they observed that were toward the middle. And they were like, maybe that's because on the outer edge, they have to be more vigilant. So they're like putting more actual attention into being awake when they're the only penguin at the nest. And then they have more sleep to catch up on. So like they have these longer stretches, but it's still like, we're still talking about microsleep. So yeah, moving on to humans and how this does or does not apply to us.
Yeah.
How long does it take you guys to fall asleep generally?
Ooh, it depends. There was a brief moment of time where I was playing Baldur's Gate 3 and just like absolutely demolishing my circadian rhythm.
Oh no.
I want to say I thrive on like maybe half an hour to an hour, but it also depends on, like, I'm a girl who has to do the silly little sleepy time cocktail as a child, and don't do this at home. As a child, I would take like Benadryl to fall asleep, which I now know is like awful for you.
Well, and that's like new recent research that like people have, like, we now know how much worse it is to take chronic Benadryl.
So never doing that again.
I'm also a recovering habitual Benadryl taker.
Yeah,
So.
Yes.
We've all been there.
Magnesium, guys, magnesium. It helps you fall asleep and it keeps your bowels regular.
I like think I just need more sleep, but so it's easy for me to fall asleep at night. But I think like also too, if I exercise, like if I lift weights, I'm like out like a light in like 10 minutes. My body's like, we must rest to build your muscles back. So I don't know.
Gotta rest for the gains.
Yeah, for the gains. So I stay up too late and I lift weights, which both are the perfect storm for falling asleep quick. But there have been times in my life where it's tough.
Totally. Yeah. And like all that is very normal. Most humans take around 5 to 20 minutes to sleep, but that's like a very rough average.
Yeah.
And there's no inherent problem with falling asleep really quickly. It can be a sign that something is wrong, but you can also just be somebody who's like very fortunate and your body is like, we in bed, we asleep.
Yeah. Right.
And yeah, also one interesting thing is that some people who think they fall asleep really quickly are probably mistaken. There's this thing called mesograde amnesia, which is that like right before you fall asleep, you tend to not be great at like creating new memories because like of how the hippocampus which is responsible for like indexing memories, it has these like bursts of activity as you're transitioning from wakefulness into sleep. So some people are just like habitually unable to remember their moments before sleep. So if you think you're somebody who instantly falls asleep, you may be wrong. But yeah, even if you do actually like your head hits the pillow in your sleep, there's no like amount of quick sleepiness that's like inherently abnormal. There's no criteria that's like you fall asleep instantaneously at night and so there must be something wrong. But there's a big caveat, because if you're regularly getting less than 8-ish hours of sleep and you fall asleep instantly, that is almost certainly because you are sleep deprived and your body needs more sleep, because most people do take a few minutes to fall asleep. So like if your head hits the pillow and you're out and like you're not that great about getting much sleep, spoiler alert, you're sleepy and you should get more sleep. So yeah, even if you like think you're fine, like I've definitely met people most of whom had like severe personality disorders, but that's another story. I've definitely met people who are like, I survive fine on 4 hours of sleep. Science should study me. But like, if you think that's true, but you also like either can't fall asleep when you're supposed to be falling asleep, or you instantly fall asleep, guess what? You're not actually thriving on those 4 hours of sleep. Your body is messed up. See a doctor.
I've been thinking a lot about that lately, because there are some nights where I'm staying up late, like editing or streaming, and then I wake up early to walk my dog, and it is like 4 hours. But then I do the thing we've talked about on this show before, where I later in the day sleep another 4 hours.
Yes.
I'm doing the Victorian 2-phase sleep.
It's true.
Yes.
And once in a blue moon, that feels okay.
Oh yeah. And once in a blue moon, there is nothing wrong with that. That's actually, that's your body being like, let's have second sleep. I see that you took first sleep and then you were waiting to take second sleep. So that's actually like a very healthy response.
Sick. Thanks for enabling me.
Oh my gosh, of course. It's where it becomes a problem is when it's like you're accumulating more and more of a sleep deficit and like your body is just trying to catch it anywhere it can. And if you're like, am I okay? Am I getting too sleepy? There is one thing to keep in mind as like a frame of reference is that basically the test they do for like narcolepsy, which fun fact, it isn't literally just like you fall asleep out of nowhere and that's the whole thing. It's actually that like your sleep cycle doesn't really happen the way it's supposed to. You go right into REM stage, like right when you fall asleep, and then the rest of the night you're actually only sleeping for short stretches because you're not going through the normal sleep phases.
Right.
So then during the day, your body is like, we literally must sleep. Like please be down on the floor. And so that's your body catching up. But anyway, if a doctor were testing you for that, generally what they do is that they'll like pick random points in the day to like have the person try to nap. And if they're able to fall asleep in less than 5 minutes for a daytime nap, like consistently, then they're not getting good sleep at night. So just something to keep in mind. It's not the end of the world, but like if you think you are thriving, #blessed, and getting very little sleep, and you are unconscious as soon as you lay down, consider perhaps maybe your body is really tired. So yeah, there is research actually on recently researchers found that even a short nap, just a few minutes, can like help your body and brain do more of the things that it's good at after getting enough sleep. But that is not the same as taking micro naps of a few seconds long. And it is still no good substitution for trying to get a good night's sleep. It's just that if you're feeling not great and you only have, 5 minutes to rest your eyes, it might be worth giving that a shot. That can be just what the doctor ordered. Before I finish my segment, I was thinking about sleepy animals. And I thought I would love to just talk about some other animals that have funny sleeps.
Yes, please.
Is there sloths?
I did not even bring up sloths because they're so famous for being sleepy.
Yeah, that's the obvious
we
answer.
want the rare sleepers.
Yeah.
I looked up chinstrap penguin on my own, and they are very cute.
Oh,
So
I gotta look.
Listeners at home,
They're very cute.
please
They're like
Google
the classic
chinstrap penguin.
They're like your classic.
Oh, they're
yeah.
cute.
Yeah.
They have little chin straps, true to the name.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So as for other animals, great apes all sleep like we do. They like lay down for the night for one long stretch, which is unique. And most other mammals have polyphasic sleep, meaning like they sleep on and off throughout a 24-hour cycle, like cats and dogs. Dogs, for example, they have a sleep-wake cycles that last a little under an hour and a half, but that adds up to like almost 11 hours of sleep on most days. But one thing I just learned, which is super interesting to me, is that some evolutionary biologists think that the reason great apes like all like make beds and go sleepy time is that they started to get bigger. And like up until then, primates just kind of, they like crouched in branches, and it's like you only have these like relatively short sleeps because like there's predators and like you're sitting in the trees and you're just crouching there and you're going to sleep for a few hours and then you're going to go, you're maybe sleep for a couple hours and then go do something else, then come back and, whatever. You don't want to make a whole thing of it. You're just crouching on a branch. But then apes started getting bigger and they couldn't crouch in branch. They were too big to crouch in branch. So like once apes had to like build something that they could lay down on, whether it was just like a nice, grassy bed or what have you, they had to like invest time and energy into finding ways to stay away from predators and like get away from distractions so that it was worth it to like create a structure and find a structure that could hold them. And so that then maybe that like created this feedback loop where they got to sleep for longer. They were able to do more cool cognitive stuff because of all their extra sleepy times. And I just think that's just like a really, really funny, like random evolutionary pressure that made us animals that have to lay down in bed all night.
Too big to crouch in a tree.
It's true. Too big for branch.
Too big for branch.
There's also, there's unihemispheric slow wave sleep, which is when an animal sleeps with half their brain. Dolphins do this, which is how they manage to stay on alert for predators constantly. They never experience REM sleep, but they're super intelligent. Yeah, never, because they're always this slow wave sleep is just a separate thing from REM sleep, different brain activity, and it's just like one brain at a time. So, but like dolphins are very intelligent, so it's like that's kind of another sleep mystery where it's like, is REM sleep actually important, or is just like a random thing that became important for humans? Obviously, we know now that it's important for us, but it's like that might have just been kind of an arbitrary thing that happened.
Does this mean that dolphins like sleep with one eye open?
So like I will actually mention.
Am I getting ahead of myself?
You're getting a little ahead of yourself, Jess. But thank you for the question.
Okay. Continue.
Yeah. So fur seals will sleep with half their brains while they're swimming. And then they sleep with their whole brains when they lay down on land. So again, it's like, all of these adaptations seem to be around like we need rest when we're out in the open water, but it's not safe to actually sleep, especially for mammals that need to like breathe. So if they entered REM sleep, and had the kind of like muscle paralysis we do when we're in REM sleep, they would just sink to the bottom and drown. So
troublesome.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's not good.
You don't want that.
No.
The ocean is really deep.
It is. You don't want to wake up at the bottom if you need to breathe air. That I know for sure. So yeah, speaking of sleeping with one eye open, yes, there are some of these unihemispheric slow wave sleepers do literally do that. So scientists at Indiana State University, they were studying mallard ducks. A lot of birds also use this kind of half brain sleep. And they filmed a row of ducks while they were sleeping. And they found that the ones at the end of the row kept the eye facing away from the rest of the group open.
Oh my God.
While the eye toward the other ducks was closed.
Oh my God.
And the ducks within the row were more likely to have both their eyes closed. And when they looked with like electrodes, they found that the ducks at the end of the line were controlling which side of their brain stayed awake. So they were keeping the outside brain awake so that they could stay on lookout. Yeah.
To have that kind of control.
I know. So wild.
If only.
Yeah.
I'd be like, I would have one eye open and then it would be shut. I don't have that self-control.
Yeah.
Totally.
Also, talk about community care.
Yeah.
Ducks watching out for each other.
Nice.
Totally.
Birds supporting birds. And there are also birds that will sleep with half their brain while they're flying, and they can like kind of coast and glide. So a lot of birds that like have really long migrations and spend like crazy amounts of time in the air, that's how they're doing it. They're
that makes
snoozing
sense.
half
That's
time.
really smart.
Yeah. And then there are animals that sleep so long. Brown bats, at least according to one source I read, sleep the longest of any animal. And I trust this source because they sleep 20 hours in a 24-hour cycle.
Oh my goodness.
And it seems like it's just because they eat mosquitoes, and the mosquitoes are only out for a few hours a day. So like there's no reason for them to be awake the rest of the time.
Your whole life is just like snoozing and then waking up really quick to eat a bug and then you go back to sleep.
Yeah. Yeah. The
That's
dining
kind
hall's
of beautiful.
open. Yeah.
That's literally the plot of my year of rest and relaxation.
True.
Oh my God. That is true. That is the
Oh
plot
my
of that book.
God.
Wow. I'd probably have liked that book more if it was about a bat.
Yeah.
But and then meanwhile, like big herbivores like elephants and giraffes, they forage so much that they only sleep a couple hours a night. And like giraffes can sometimes sleep for like less than an hour a night. Because like if a giraffe laid down and went to sleep, there would be no more giraffes. They have very fast predators, and they're very large, and you can't really hide in a tree as a giraffe, for example. So yeah, they take little naps and spend all their time just kind of lumbering around. And there are a lot of animals that like don't sleep much, but take a lot of time resting and really have like an actual physiological state that's like we're in chill mode, which like I certainly feel like I have one, but I feel like with humans it's less of a like a formal biological state.
Right.
So like koalas, there was a time when researchers studying them in zoos thought that they slept for 22 hours a day. But looking at animals in the wild, it showed that they actually only sleep for 14 hours a day, but they rest a lot. They have a lot of like very dormant phases. They're very chill. And that's because their diet of eucalyptus leaves takes so much energy to digest.
Right.
Like pandas with bamboo, they have evolved to basically just like eat and digest their food.
Or like me when I eat a Chipotle bowl.
Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You go into a dormant phase. My last animal sleep fact is that, you know, how people say like sharks have to keep moving or they die. So like sharks, you know, we know that they can engage in sort of like, you know, micro sleep, or they like kind of just like rest a little bit. But there's been a question for a long time of like, how do sharks breathe? Because they move and the water goes through their gills, and that's how they breathe when they're sleeping. And in 2016, researchers who were looking at great white sharks near the Baja California Peninsula found a female great white shark, and she was like basically just drifting in shallow water with her mouth open against a strong current so that the water passed through her gills.
No way.
And I have sleep apnea, and I use a CPAP machine, and I'm like, it's literally what I do.
Oh my
Nature
God.
CPAP.
Yeah.
Oh
So
my goodness.
I love the image of this like drowsy great white shark just like mouth wide open being like, the water can come to me.
Yeah. I also love that a lot.
Yeah. So
Enough with the shark slander.
Yeah. Sharks take naps too. They just don't do it where you can see them. So yeah, those are all of my animal sleep facts for today. I hope you enjoyed. And yeah, the chinstrap penguin, adorable, incredible evolutionary strategy, absolutely wacky sleep habits. Do not copy the chinstrap penguin. If you find yourself falling asleep for several seconds at a time, that is a sign that you are sleep deprived and you should not operate moving machinery. You should go to sleep is what you should do.
Yeah, take a nap.
Yeah. And if that doesn't seem to be fixing the problem, you should go to a doctor about your microsleeping. But for these penguins, it's all good. It's excellent.
I love that. I didn't realize so much of the animal kingdom was so varied with sleep. Like, it's wild to think about.
Yeah. I also realized while researching this, like, I guess in my head, I figured there were just like a couple of categories of how animals sleep. But nope, there's a lot. There's some weird
so
stuff.
Varied. Yeah.
And there's also like, there's so many animals we like haven't really observed the sleep of, especially outside of captivity, where it's like, similarly to like any kind of behavior you're observing in captivity. It's like, yeah, if somebody locked you in a room and gave you all the food you needed, you'd probably nap all day too.
Yeah. It's like those Mr. Beast scenarios.
I literally was just thinking that.
All right, let's take a quick break and then we'll be back with some more facts. This episode is brought to you by Honeylove. Want to make sure you stick to your New Year's resolution this year? Then pick an easy one, like not wearing uncomfortable bras anymore. Honeylove has revolutionized the bra game, so you get all the support you need without having to deal with uncomfortable underwire. For a limited time only, you can get Honeylove on sale. Get 20% off your entire order with our exclusive link, honeylove.com/weirdest. Support our show and check them out at honeylove.com/weirdest. You know that feeling when you get home from a long day and immediately want to take off your bra? Yeah. Me too. With Honeylove, you'll never experience that again. Their bras are so comfy that you might just forget you're wearing them. But it doesn't stop with bras. They also have super comfortable shapewear, tanks, and leggings for everyday support. I don't wear shapewear very often, but when I do, Honeylove is definitely my go-to brand. It's comfortable and secure, and it actually highlights my curves instead of smothering them. Shapewear shouldn't be hard. Stop wearing uncomfortable underwear and start wearing stuff that makes you look good and feel good. Treat yourself to the best bras and shapewear on the market and save 20% off at honeylove.com/weirdest. Use our exclusive link to get 20% off. honeylove.com/weirdest. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Start the new year with confidence thanks to Honeylove. This episode is brought to you by Babbel. The best way to learn a language is immersion, living where the language is spoken and using it every day. But even if that's not in the cards this year, you can still learn a language the second best way, and that's with Babbel. Don't pay hundreds of dollars for private tutors or waste hours on apps that don't really help you speak the language. Be a better you in 2024 with Babbel, the science-backed language learning app that actually works. Babbel's tips and tools are approachable, accessible, rooted in real-life situations, and delivered with conversation-based teaching, so you're ready to practice what you've learned in the real world. Babbel's courses make it easy to learn real-world language skills. It's helping me learn to order food and ask for directions in German without checking translation apps or dictionaries. dictionaries. Here's a special limited time deal for our listeners. Right now, get 55% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/weirdest. Get 55% off at babbel.com/weirdest, spelled BABBEL.com/weirdest. Rules and restrictions may apply. Okay, we're back. And Amanda, talk to me about parking.
Yeah. So for context, my boyfriend is a reader. He loves a nonfiction read or a classic. And we both share a love of books. So we get to talking about what we are reading. And we live in Pittsburgh, where the parking chair is a really popular thing.
Yes. Also a thing in Chicago. Very iconic.
Yeah, it's a thing in the Midwest generally. So a parking chair is generally used after snowfall. Like if you dig out your parking spot, you don't want someone else to take it. So you just throw like a folding chair or any cheap chair into your parking spot so that no one can take it. And also in Pittsburgh, we primarily have street parking. So finding a good parking spot is important to everyday life. He read this really interesting book called Paved Paradise, How Parking Explains the World by Henry Graybar.
What a cool idea for a book.
Yes, it's something that you don't think about, but when you think about it, you're like, oh, like that's actually, yes. And now I have not read it yet, but it's definitely on my reading list, because after hearing about it, I'm like, we must radicalize parking.
Yeah.
Big parking is taking over everything. So according to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, road rage has been responsible for 300 deaths since 2013. Per the American Psychological Association, our besties, the APA, around 30 murders per year are linked to road rage.
That's scary, dude.
Yeah. And in this book, they list a couple incidents where people were shot due to road rage, like specifically fighting over a parking space. And they detail, I'm unfortunately forgetting the name now, but they mentioned this one guy who did a hate crime. And before doing said hate crime, he was like a big parking stickler, like sticking notes on people's cars, being like, hello, you are doing bad parking.
It kind of reminds me of like the road rage thing is very similar to me in my mind to like internet trolls, because you have this like level of separation like physically from the people you're getting angry at. And it's just, I fear both road ragers and internet trolls.
Yeah,
totally,
definitely.
Yeah.
So a lot of people fight over parking spaces despite there being a lot of parking in the United States. So there's between 1 to 2 billion parking spaces in America.
Whoa.
A study of 27 mixed-use neighborhoods found that parking was oversupplied by 65%.
Oversupplied?
Oversupplied.
Huh.
And neighborhoods with parking shortages, like self-defined parking shortages, were still oversupplied by 45%.
Huh.
Is everybody just so bad at parking?
Everyone is so bad at parking. And I'll get into this later, but like everyone is like searching for like a good parking spot.
Sure.
So there's both social and psychological reasons behind parking rage and road rage. A lot of rules of the road are self-imposed. Like not everyone agrees what you do in the left lane. Not everyone thinks it's for passing.
Yeah.
And when not everyone follows these self-imposed rules, people get angry when they see other people not doing this socially acceptable thing. So they, lash out and they become the all-knowing parking figure.
Yeah.
And they're like, hello, youth, let me lay on my horn and then yell at you because you're driving in the left lane when you should be using it for parking, not for parking, for passing.
Yeah.
So parking theorist Sarah Marusik says that parking follows what she calls frontier law, where people find a
just everything you just said was an incredible clause. So thank you, and please continue.
So it's where people find a public parking spot, especially, you know, if it's in front of their house, and they claim it as theirs a la the 1800s.
I was just going to say, a lot of this feels very entitlement-y.
Yes, which I'm also going to get into. So now the horses and wagons have been replaced with heavy death machines, which also represent wealth and status.
Totally.
So for example, if you don't have a car, you're a failure, which is untrue. And back to the entitlement point, there's a lot of entitlement when it comes to a car. You know, you work hard to buy the car. Being a quote unquote good driver is like a very big thing that people take pride in. So for example, just to your point of parallel parking, lots of people, you know,
we like to brag.
Are like people love to brag about like how good of drivers they are.
Yeah.
And I can't even lie. Like when I'm in a car and someone's a good driver, I'm like, oh, like I feel safe with them.
Yeah.
Which is like a psychological thing. So speaking of, high stress and displaced anger can cause road rage. But there's also a territorial aspect to it.
Yeah.
Because no one wants to compromise on what they view as theirs, despite parking generally being a public entity. So drivers are pretty much toddlers who don't want to share their pencil for fear of losing it and never getting it back, despite there still being plenty of pencils in this world, even if they don't get their pencil back. So the reason why parking is really, you know, shows how we are as a society is that we as people struggle with sharing and being inconvenienced, which we saw in everyday life through like COVID response and college debt relief, and now especially parking. So Graybar's solution is literally sharing on an infrastructure level. There's so much we can do for spaces that are generally saved for parking, like restaurant pop-ups and closed streets. And that's all dependent on car owners and local governments being willing to transform parking spaces into these mixed-use third spacey areas, which that is an entirely other different subject that is really, really interesting.
Big time.
Also, this world is made for cars, so having more pedestrian areas can help, which again, also something on an infrastructure level. And it's also as simple as just being okay with parking a little bit further away from where you park and just walking. So would recommend the book, add it to your reading list. It's certainly added onto mine. I'm currently
look at it.
The cover is really fun.
It looks like a street sign.
It looks like a street
or like
sign.
a parking sign.
I love it.
Oh my god, if I can get it on audiobook, it's so over. We're so back.
And like perusing through it, the language seems it's a book about a really interesting subject that's written in this like really fun and voicey way about a subject that is so unanimous with everyday life that we don't think to look into.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned convenience because it's something I've been thinking about a lot. I was just in both Germany but even more so in Denmark, and noticed that in a lot of places, things like elevators would have tons of signage on them being like, save this for like, get more exercise, take the stairs, like this is just for people who really need it. And like parking spaces close to entrances would be the same way, which like I know that in the US occasionally you'll see a like, this isn't a handicapped spot, but it's like we put a silhouette of a pregnant lady on it to remind you to like not be a jerk and take it if you don't need it. And as someone who like has a like relatively invisible disability, there were moments in Copenhagen where I was like, I really resent this sign that's making it like making me feel like I will be judged harshly for deciding not to take the stairs. But like on the flip side, I think obviously if they didn't have an elevator at all, that would be a huge problem. And I'm sure there's probably slightly better, less ableist language they can use. However, I do think that the idea of like reminding people, like sometimes you taking something that's slightly less convenient to you means everyone gets to enjoy a better life, and like wild.
Yeah. And it makes me, first of all, it makes me think of the sleeping ducks we just talked about, you know, bettering your community. But yeah, I was thinking as you're talking about this, Amanda, like it seems like such an American thing to
absolutely
do this, and how different things are in Europe, where and other parts of the world too, where you know cities are built around walking and not cars.
Yeah, I think the big stat is there are more 3-car garages than single family homes in America.
Stop.
Yeah.
Oh, I hate that.
Yeah. And even I'm noticing in Pittsburgh, a lot of these like commercial buildings being built where it's just like, oh, we made another commercial office space. And it's sort of like, how many businesses will actually be in that commercial office space?
Yeah.
And that commercial office space will also, a lot of cities have changed this law, but there are some like zoning laws that state that you have to build a certain amount of parking spots for this commercial area.
Yeah.
So I think it's Seattle that stopped that, which also, again, that leads to more parks and focus on walking.
Yeah.
And all that jazz.
Yeah. Well, and I know, you know, I'm in Jersey City, and during like peak pandemic, there was like more road space ceded to, you know, parklets for outdoor dining, and they increased the like pedestrian walkway area downtown. There are some streets that are closed off, and thankfully they kept the expanded like pedestrian plaza, which is great. But a bunch of businesses outside of that little stretch, like either have been forced to give up their outdoor dining spaces, or like have to pay a bunch more for it, or are like fighting with the city about it. And the only argument against them is like it's taking up parking spaces. And it's like, I, as someone who has now had to deal with street parking as a new car owner, I can say we do actually have plenty of parking here.
Right.
It's not always something we can do without sparing 5 minutes or some amount of frustration or whatever. But like, there is definitely enough parking, and it makes me so annoyed because like it would improve the city so much to have more protected bike lanes and more outdoor public space. And there's just always this argument that comes back up where it's like almost taken as common sense, that it's like, well, obviously though, the big downside is that we don't have enough parking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it also makes me think of like, when I look across the street and I see a bunch of cars lined up, but there's at least like 3 feet between them.
Oh,
Right,
sure.
yeah.
And it's like, all right, can we just, and I think it also leads to, it's caused because people are like, oh, like I don't want to damage my car in any way by being near this other car, which is like a very, very valid reason. But it's also like, come on, man, just like pull up a little bit.
Yeah.
You know?
This is the first year that I've lived in an apartment that I have like a garage in a long time, or since I've lived in Chicago. And it's the first year I haven't had to dig out my parking spot out of the snow. And it is life-changing. But I've been there where we have to dig it out. And then like, I've personally never done the chair thing, but I've seen it, and I like have immense fear in my heart to even consider moving a chair. You know, like you don't do that. But yeah, parking. It is a really big cultural thing here that you really don't even like think twice about until you do.
Yeah, because I mean, we grow up just used to it.
Yeah.
You know? So yeah, down with big parking.
Agreed.
We're walk pilled now. We're pedestrian pilled.
Big time.
We
baby.
are jaunt maxing.
Listen, I have been pedestrian pilled for some time, but I hadn't realized how much parking was the issue. I was focused on the cars when they're in motion, but that's how they get
also,
you. They're also a problem when they're stopped.
Yeah, and it also is a like public infrastructure problem because it's like even in spaces that have like a pretty good public transit system, like especially here in Pittsburgh, we have a bunch of bridges. So there are literally entire neighborhoods that are easier to get to by car. Like the difference of like a 1 hour bus ride versus like a 20-minute car ride.
Oh, sure.
So it's like crazy subject. There's like many layers to it. Really nuanced. So yeah, read the book. Henry Graybar, thank you for your work.
I wish Robert
We're
Moses
so
had
appreciative.
been. I wish Robert Moses had been obsessed with trains. You know, that's
Yeah.
If only.
If only.
What a world we'd live in. All right, we'll take one more quick break, and then we'll be back with one more fact. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Around New Year's, we tend to get obsessed with how to change ourselves instead of celebrating and reinforcing the things we're already doing right. Therapy can help you find your strengths so you can ditch the extreme resolutions and make changes that really stick. I love my therapist, and I've relied on therapy to help me be the best version of myself for years. Therapy isn't just for people who've experienced traumatic events, and it's not just something you should do when you're feeling really low. It can also help you with everyday problems. Working with the right therapist can help you learn positive coping skills and set you up for success in all aspects of life. If you're thinking of trying therapy and don't know where to start, consider giving BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, which means it's really flexible. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. If it's not a good fit, you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. This year, celebrate the progress you've already made. Visit betterhelp.com/weirdest today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/weirdest. Okay, we're back. And Jess, let's talk about medieval torture. Or the lack thereof.
Woo!
Yes.
Medieval torture.
To be clear, it did still exist, but it's just there are some misconceptions.
Great, cool.
So I've been thinking a lot about Iron Maidens lately. Not the band, of course, but these... Although, if you're thinking about Iron Maiden, the band, that's also fine. That's cool. But I'm thinking about the legendary torture device of yore. Basically, when people talk about these things, they're talking about these big, human-sized, like, sarcophagi, they kind of look like. They stand upright. And they're meant to put a human inside and shut the door. However... the kicker is that the door has a whole bunch of spikes and needly things. And so it pierces the person that's inside when that door closes. And yeah, there's a lot of like different kind of varying writing on these things. But people have also, you know, proposed and said that these spikes were arranged in such a way that they wouldn't pierce your vital organs. So
oh, yikes.
Right, because otherwise it's kind of less of a torture device and more of a squish your dead device.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you know, close the door, you wouldn't instantly die. You'd just be like, oh man, this really sucks.
I'm in a lot of pain. I'm losing a lot of blood.
Exactly.
Things are going blurry. It's dark in here.
And people also said a big thing about that was also like you suffer from sleep deprivation because if you like relax, your body like moves in such a way that like you receive more piercing. And so all of this was supposed to be happening in the medieval era from like 500 to 1500 AD roughly. Yeah. And again, these were, you know, thought to be torture devices or like punishment devices used to either get the truth out of someone or, you know, just punish them. But I also want to note that torture has been studied scientifically and objectively, and a lot of the evidence says that torture really doesn't work like we think it does.
Yeah, I have heard that.
Yeah, and that a lot of times it does elicit falsities and untruths, and people just say stuff that's, that'll stop the pain.
Yeah. It's almost like there's no good reason to do a war crime,
It's,
almost, almost
when
like
you put it
that's
like
the
that.
case.
Yeah. So anyway, what sparked the thought of Iron Maidens in my brain? Rachel, you said this earlier. This couldn't be from a video game, and in fact it is. So I was playing Resident Evil 4. They remade it last year, now that it's 2024. Oh my God. Came out last year, and I won't spoil anything. I'll spoil this one kind of enemy because it's a big part of the game, but there's these, they're colloquially called Iron Maidens, and they're like zombie-like creatures. They have spikes all over their bodies, and they're maybe the most scary thing in the whole game, for me at least. This is kind of gruesome, but in the game, you can like kind of explode their limbs off a little bit, so they're just kind of like wiggling around like little worms, but then they like lunge at you, and it's the scariest, worst thing ever. And it's awesome. But when you finally are able to like dispatch them and get rid of them, their bodies just explode and like shoot the spikes everywhere. So it's like a reverse Iron Maiden. So yeah, they're just a handful. And it kind of, I was talking to my chat because I streamed RE4 on Twitch, and I was talking to my chat about it, and somebody in my chat was like, Iron Maiden's like, well, I won't spoil it yet, but they told me to look into Iron Maidens, and I was like, whoa. And then I was thinking about, there are more Iron Maidens in this game called Demon Souls, which is a game made by From Software, who made Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Elden Ring, yada yada. And those, are not like a reverse Iron Maiden. They really look like what it was described historically from medieval times. They look like sarcophagi. When you open them up, sometimes it's an item, or sometimes it's a little guy who'll just pop out and stab you. You got to like roll the dice.
Ain't that life?
Yep. And yeah, the Iron Maidens in Demon Souls were inspired also by a manga called Berserk, which inspired a lot of the Dark Souls.
Oh, yeah.
And Bloodborne and a lot of that stuff. But the kicker, which I almost just spoiled, that original Iron Maiden of yore, the things that were supposedly used in medieval times to torture people or punish people, the thing that has influenced so much popular media today, from games to books to movies to beyond. What if I told you they weren't real? They were a fake.
No, we've been punked.
Oh man. Why did people make up so much fake medieval stuff?
Oh, I'll get there.
Oh my gosh.
So, basically there's no reliable or like confirmed writing about an actual Iron Maiden before like the 18th or 19th century, which is like a huge jump when you're thinking about when they should have existed from 500 to 1500 AD. Basically, so step one, there was this guy back in the late 1700s. He was a German philosopher. His name was Johann Philipp Siebenkees. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but And this guy wrote about a weird situation that happened apparently all the way back in 1515, where this guy was illegally forging coins. A terrible crime, apparently.
Even today, a terrible crime.
Sure, yes. Yeah, don't forge those coins. And so he was apparently tortured and killed by a device that, for all intents and purposes, was an Iron Maiden. So it was like a human-sized cabinet with spikes. And so when this piece of writing started circulating later on in the 1800s, all the Victorian era folks were like, oh my God, those medieval folks were so barbaric and so uncivilized and so different from us. We could never act that way. Look how terrible they were and how great we are. So obviously it's a lot easier to kind of point the finger at people from the era prior and be like, look how much better we are, which is shitty, don't do that. And looking back now, some historians even suspect that this Johann philosopher guy maybe embellished or maybe even completely made up this whole Iron Maiden thing from the 1500s. And why did he come up with this? Well, there were some other kind of similar devices that historians think maybe contributed to this Iron Maiden hysteria. So my favorite, Rachel, you might not have to help me with this German word, but it's Schandmantel, or it's nicknamed as the barrel of shame.
The barrel of shame. Oh, that's good.
It's hilarious. So you put a person in this giant barrel and just their head sticks out. And sometimes it had a little bell like suspended over the top of the head. So people would hear, it's like a cat. Like they would hear you when you walk down the street, and then they could come out and throw rotten vegetables at you.
Yeah.
So
Here
it was like
comes
a public
the shame barrel.
Yeah. It's like public humiliation situation. And yeah, it was mostly used to punish like drunkards or sex workers or like apparently also poachers, which I didn't realize was such a huge issue back in the day, but I guess it was. And
yeah, I would think that poaching would be like en vogue, you know?
Yeah, I know. But apparently some people did not think it was very chill. But yeah, some people, historians think some people maybe saw this and were like, oh, what if that, but spikes, you know?
Sure, yeah.
And so after this kind of like Iron Maiden hysteria started happening from this piece of writing and all of these stories that may or may not have been true, recreated Iron Maidens started popping up in museums and stuff, which obviously is kind of problematic when you consider they probably weren't real. And one even made it to the Chicago World's Fair in 1893, and then later went on tour across America.
Wow.
Which is very funny to think about.
That's what happened with chastity belts too. I think I talked about that at a live show a couple years back.
I forgot about that. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and it's like similar timeline too, where it's like in the 1800s people started making these and saying they were things that had existed in the medieval era, and actually like they did not.
Totally. Yeah, it's a very similar thing. And when I was reading about this, I saw chastity belts mentioned, so I think it's a very common thing. So yeah, kind of going off of that, this happened with other torture devices as well, or supposed torture devices. So there was something called the pear of anguish.
Not a fruit I want to eat.
It goes up the butt, right?
Well, they thought
that was the idea.
Yeah. Or any orifice.
Right, I guess.
And it's kind of like, it was like metal. It was like a foot or two long. And when you turn the key at one end, it kind of like expands like a cursed speculum, and speculums are already very fucking cursed. So,
oh dear. Yeah.
But, you know, it was on the same timeline as chastity belts and Iron Maidens. And people were like, oh yeah, this was definitely a butt thing. Like hands down.
People need to get their minds out of the gutter.
Yeah, I know. Nothing's changed, you know. But yeah, it turns out, you know, they found some pairs of anguish that had like caps on the expanding end. So like you couldn't put it inside something unless you were manually holding it shut. So there were like these different kinds of pairs of anguish that have now clued in historians to be like, okay, I think that maybe this was like a thing you use to extract fruit juice from something.
This is actually an anguish of pears.
Yeah, like literally. Or like somebody else said, maybe it's a shoe stretcher, you know, like
totally. Yeah.
There are no need to jump straight to torture. You know what I mean?
Exactly. There's so many things you could imagine a device like that was used for. And the fact that some dude in the 1800s was like, oh, I know where that goes.
Yeah, right.
Says a lot more about them than it does about people in medieval times.
Exactly. So yeah, at the end of the day, you know, Iron Maidens, pair of anguish, probably other devices, chastity belts, you know, a lot of these things were just mostly myths made up by folks in the 1800s, 1900s to kind of point the finger and say, no, they are uncivilized, but not us. And that wasn't really the case. You know, I think it's important to like examine these things, especially when you think about like how Iron Maidens were incorrectly described in museums and that kind of thing. Like it's misinformation, fake news at work. So yeah, folks in the medieval age were actually a lot more civilized than commonly thought. And it's important to get the right version of history, I think. So yep, that's my Iron Maiden fact.
I loved that people just lie. And then other people are just like, you know what, that sounds close enough. I'll accept that as truth.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, you know, obviously we are dealing with a lot of misinformation now, and, you know, the internet and AI, can be a tool for the spreading of misinformation. However, like, I also think it's important to keep in mind that, like, before people could, like, look stuff up, there was so much just, like, people just said stuff. Just, from your parents repeating a thing for years, and then you finally get around to Googling it and you're like, well, that was simply not a fact. But also, like, when I know I talk about this all the time, but when I was researching my book, there were facts that got shared everywhere that I traced back to, like, a book from the 90s, because people would be like, no one will look this up. Like, there's no one can disprove this.
Right.
And so people definitely have a long history of just imagining things. And I feel like it's not even that people, like, sat there deciding to fabricate something. I think with a lot of the stuff that I had to, like, debunk in researching my book, and probably with some of these medieval era things, it was people thinking, like, I am very smart, and making what is obviously a logical conclusion about, this letter I read from medieval times, and this one artifact I've seen, and, like, this thing we know is totally definitely true about how culture worked back then. And, like, that's so much more dangerous when people are just like, I am very intelligent, I have synthesized the information, and let me tell you how it was.
Yeah, a lot of, like, ego stuff.
Yes.
Wrapped up in this. Yeah.
The powers of deduction. Use it for good.
It's true. Continue to deduce, perhaps. When you think you've come up with something really smart, keep asking yourself questions.
Yeah.
Because maybe you're about to put a dog collar in a museum telling people it was a chastity device, which is a thing that happened. So, man, what a world.
The historical record, man.
Yeah.
What a place.
Big time.
Well, man, a lot of great stuff today about human folly.
Yeah.
And also napping penguins.
Yeah. A perfect mix.
And
for
also human
thing.
folly, because if you think that you only need to sleep for a few hours a night, you're wrong. I'm so sorry, but you're wrong. If you're trying to sleep and only able to sleep for a few hours a night, you have my full sympathies, and I hope you're able to figure that out. If you truly believe that's just how you operate, you're wrong. I'm sorry. So yeah, folks, remember to follow Jess on Twitch, follow me on Patreon, so that you don't miss our upcoming bonus content and non-weirdest thing content, because we'll have some of that too.
Yeah.
Amanda, thanks so much for joining us for our first episode
Always
of 2024.
Woo!
I resolve to be a good person who parks and not get into any fistfights over parking spaces.
Honestly, same.
And the best thing is, I don't drive, so
easy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Easy peasy lemon squeezy.
I'll be a good enough parker for all of us.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jess.
Of course.
The Weirdest Thing I Learned This Week is produced by all of our hosts, including me, Rachel Feltman, along with Jess Boddy, who also serves as our audio engineer and editor extraordinaire. Our theme music is by Billy Cadden. Our logo is by Katie Beloff. If you have questions, suggestions, or weird stories to share, tweet us at weirdest_thing. Thanks for listening, weirdos.